folks. Welcome, everyone. Sorry, I'm just turning off another. I could hear an echo. All right. I think this is good. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to another online meetup. I am Max Katz, and I lead the community for Okta workflows. Just to be sure, if you just want to put a quick message in the chat that you can hear me okay, that would be awesome. Also, if you would like to tell also in chat where you're joining from, please do so. I think it's always interesting to know where people are joining from. I'm joining today from the San Francisco Bay Area. All right. Hi, Tim from Milwaukee. Very good to have you here. Chicago, very nice. Welcome. And I'm assuming Atlanta, very nice. And I'm assuming you folks can hear me fine. So that's good. But let's get started. So the hello and welcome. That's what I'm doing now. One more thing I want to say is this event is being recorded, and you can watch this replay right after we end the live session, right on Crowdcast. And I will also upload this to YouTube. And then tomorrow I'll send a message with the link to YouTube and some other resources. And also the YouTube has a lot of other videos. So if you're not aware of the YouTube playlist that we have, once you have a link, definitely check it out. It has, I think, over 40, maybe 45 videos now, short videos on various workflows topics. Right, and then we'll spend most of the time on, I'm going to show a number of examples on how to process a list and workflows. And then at the end, if there are any questions, we'll do that. All right. So let's jump right into building examples. All right. So all right. So I'm going to create a new folder here. Process list and online meetup. We'll call this too. Okay. So creating a new folder. Here we go. All right. And let's create the first flow here, and we'll call this users and for each. So let's enable this option so we can see the flow history. All right. And now I'm going to connect to Okta. So the list of people, the list of users that I'm going to do here, I'm going to get a list of users in my organization. And I'm going to go to Okta. And then right here, I have the filter here. And so this is going to be my list, right? So I'm working with a list of users, but of course you can be working with any other list. It can be a list of groups. It can be really a list of anything. I mean, the concepts are identical. And I'm going to say first 200, although I only have 4 users that we're going to be working with. And I'm going to click save. And now I'm going to get active. All right. And also one thing I usually do is that there's this long list. You can actually collapse it like this if you want. But this is good. So I want to see all the active users. So this is my list of records, and let's give this a test. All right, then you can see I have 4 users. Okay. So the next step, and again, this is of course the core of this online meetup, is how do you process this? You know, how do you iterate over the users and then do something, right, with each user? So let's do that next. So to do that, we are going to use a card called for each, and this is from the list. There are 2 other ones. There's the one with ignore errors, and then there's also one for an object, but we are going to use the one that's list here. And then we're going to connect the users like this. All right. So we're saying that for each, here's a list of users. Now iterate over the list. Now, what happens now is that, well, next is that I need to select the helper flow. So the way you process a list of anything really is that you use a helper flow. That will, what's going to happen is that each user is going to be passed into the helper flow, right? And then you can do whatever you need in the helper flow, and then it's going to go and pass you in the next user or the next record or the next group, or again, whatever list you're working with. So one thing, just kind of a little bit, I guess maybe tricky, is that it's not going to let me save this flow unless I have a helper flow. And I don't have helper flow now. So what I actually usually do is that I actually do this. Before I even use the for each, I create the helper flow and then I come back here. So let's do that. And so I'm going to create a helper flow, users, and I usually do helper, and we'll call this for each. I'm going to enable this. Right. Now, a flow becomes a helper flow when the first card is helper flow. Okay. So again, quickly show this again, is that we add an event right here, helper flow. So now this is a helper flow. And now next is that you define what data is passed into the helper flow. Now, I think the sort of I guess the easiest at this point is to just pass in the entire user object. Again, it can be a group in your case or anything else you're working with. I'm going to pass in the user, everything. One important thing is that you want to change the data type or just the type because by default it's text. So you want to change it to object. Okay. And that's all you need to set up helper flow, at least to get it sort of working. Let's go back and let's open our main flow. And now we can go back and set up the for each. We're going to take the users that we found and now choose flow. We select here. And now notice what happens, that this field appeared. Okay, this I can, well, I'll have another example, so that's fine. But this field appeared. Now it says here, so a list of users run this helper flow with the following values. So it's asking which value should be passed to helper flow. And then what you do is that there's a drop down, right? And this is all the data from the user, but we decided we want to pass in just the object itself. And then that's the object right here. This is the top value here. Okay, so again, you open this drop down and you select. Now we can save. Let's turn on this flow. So this is already enough for us to run and see how it works. Let's open the helper flow. Let's also turn it on. And then let's run. All right. So we can see this is the list of records that was passed. Again, the 4 records that were passed to the helper flow. Let's go to helper flow. And then we can see the 4 executions, right? And then we can see, so this is each user. This is the first user that was passed into the helper flow. All right. So I usually sort of do this when I build a helper flow just to make sure that this works and I can see the data being passed into the helper flow. All right. So again, what we did here is that we're just passing the entire object, and you can see you got all the information here about the user. Now, let's go back here. So what you can do next is that you can now get specific properties from the user object. Okay, and so one way to do that is to use a card called get multiple. Okay, and then we can connect the user, and then right here we would specify the path in the JSON object. So what I usually do is that if you're not familiar with the JSON, that you know exactly what the fields are, again, I usually go back to flow history and I open this and I looked at this object, and this tells me which keys I can use. So for example, if I want to use a mobile phone, this is the one, or the login, or the last login. All right. So this is again helpful if if you're working with an object that you're not familiar with. Perhaps it's coming from a third-party REST API. So this is usually one way. At least this is the way I do it, is that I just pass in the entire object, and then you can see what's available. So let's say we want to get the email and I don't know, last login, for example. So we can say email and then last login, right? Save. And let's run this again. And we can see now that we get the email for this user and the last login. If I go on the previous or another execution, we can see another email. All right. So this is how you would retrieve values from that object. And then, of course, process, just continue the flow here. Of course, you can build any other logic here. Now, so it's definitely one way, and this is a fine way to do it, is to pass the entire object. Now, another option is that you can just pass particular fields. So if you remember in the dropdown that it had the object, but also the properties of the object. Right here. So you don't have to pass the entire object, all right? You can just pass specific fields. So let me show you how to do that. So to start, again, you would set those properties right here. And then let's say you want to do the email. User, I'll just use the same names here, email. And let's do last login, all right? So both are of type, both are text here, right? And this is the original user. Let's save, and let's go back here. Now, there's still only one field. So the way to update this is that you need to click on helper flow and sort of select it again. So again, to update the inputs, we select the helper flow, and then it's selected already, and then we just click choose. And notice that the updated inputs are not showing here, all right? So you do need to set them all again. So that's kind of a little extra few clicks here. But so we're still passing the entire object. And now for the email, we now scroll through the list and we select email. And then for the last login, we select last login. Okay. Let's go back here and let's just sort of, I guess, just print those values, and we can use the assign card and just do something like this. You can see them here, but this is just another way to do it. All right, let's click test. And let's go here. And then you can see that we've got those values here that were passed. So this is from the previous sort of, example, right? We're getting it from the object, but now we're also passing those values directly into the flow. All right. So in general, it's fine to pass in the entire object. It's probably going to be sort of a little bit sort of optimized, I guess, if you don't need the entire object, right? It's going to be less data is going to be passed. So if you know ahead of time, like, hey, this is the only field I need, so it might make sense to just pass in just the property, for example. And of course, you can always update it. So it's not like you set it and that's it. Now, if you would like, you can also Let me see here. Oh, sorry, that's another example. Um, that's when you're streaming, you can pass a static value into the helper flow. So I'm going to do that later. But anyhow, this is how you, let me show you the helper flow again. This is how you set up the flow. So again, it's important. The key is right here is that you want to make sure that this is the type matches. So that's important. But that's basically it. So again, the user here and the types are correct here. But that's pretty much how you would set this up to process using for each. Let me see if I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, I don't believe so. Actually, let me do one more thing. Let's pass just a random ID. I think this is the example I wanted to show you. So let me do that. Let's do just random ID, and let's make this to be a number. And then we can do something like this. I think this is the static example that I wanted to show you. So what you can also do is, again, it's not showing here. So we do need to update, and then item, and then email, and then last login. So what I actually had in mind is that you can just pass a static value as well, right? Just the same. I'm passing an ID here, but it can be an email, for example, or it can be anything. So let's do this a quick run. Let's go here. So right here, you can see every execution, of course, will have the same ID here now, right? So that's the example that I wanted to show you. All right, so this is using for each. So the next example I want to show is going to look very similar, but I'm going to use the streaming option. So let's do that. Let's create another flow here, and we'll call this users, actually streaming. All right, it's going to look very similar. Let's get Okta, and let's get filter. Now, and again, as before, if I select the stream matching record option, what's going to happen is that I can't save the flow unless I specify the helper flow. So actually what I do in this option also is I usually set it to this. This also allows me to test this card just to make sure it works. But also gives me the opportunity to create the helper flow. So let's do that. Let's create the helper flow. And we'll call this users helper streaming. All right. So the streaming setup is slightly different. I mean, the idea is very similar. Is that first we need to add the helper flow here, but the inputs are different. So the first input is going to be record, and it needs to be of type object. And then there is another input, state, that also of type object. Okay, so this is the record. This is the current user right here, record. And state, this allows you to pass any other additional information, any other additional data to the helper flow, right? But this, again, just like this is already enough for us to test this. So let's go back to user streaming, and now we can switch this to streaming and select status active. So notice the difference is that before we would get a list first and then pass it to for each card. With streaming, there's just a single card. So the streaming is built into this filter card. Is that and I think this is available for Okta cards, but it's going to automatically stream the records to a helper flow. right? And that's the name, streaming. So in general, this is recommended when you have a lot of data. The streaming option just works a little, faster, and it's just more optimized. You're doing it for each. And so let's select the helper flow. I think it's this one, right? Helper streaming. All right. And that's it. So you don't need to specify any values in a dropdown. So the entire user object is going to be streamed to the helper flow. So let's give this a run. Let's turn this flow on. Let's open the helper flow. Okay. And give this a test. So another thing, what's really nice is that the streaming option gives you the number of records that were streamed right here. Let's go here. And it looks very similar, that this is the one user in this case that was streamed, and then there are 3 more. Okay. Now, if we wanted to again get some values from this, right? So we can again use get multiple, for example, and that connect the record, which is the user, and then here we can do email, and then we can do the last login. Okay, I'm going to run this in a second, but I want to cover this. So state, so this allows to pass any additional data to the helper flow. For example, can be a static variable. So let's say you want to pass admin email. So maybe you're sending an email to all the users, and there's this admin email that you need to include, and it's static, for example. So let's go back here. So again, nothing to really refresh here, but you do need to specify the field here. So what's really important is that the name has to match. So notice the admin email here, and it's a text. And then what you do here is you create admin email. That's the name of the field. And then you can say admin at okta.com, for example. And then you can, of course, pass other fields, other data as well. But let's go here and let's do our assign. And so we can just see the value. Let's save. And let's test this. So you can see this is the static value now. And if we go to the helper flow, then we can see that for every run, we can see that the static value was passed. All right. So this is how you can pass additional data to the helper flow that's not part of the record that you're streaming to the helper flow. So again, this is another option. Again, in general, so this is available for Okta cards, but in general, it's a little bit sort of faster, more optimized using the streaming option than for each. So again, if you have a lot of records, I think it is recommended to use the streaming option instead of the for each. Okay. We have a few more minutes left. So let me show you one more example. And I mentioned this earlier, like if you're calling an API, so the examples that I showed you, we've been using the Okta card, but you can also be getting a list of something from an external API. So let me show you how that looks. And I have too many folders here, but let me find. It's right here. And what I have is I'm calling an API called random user. It's an API for testing. It just generates, you call an API and it gives you a list of users with some random information. I'm just doing 5 results, just 5 users, and it has a lot of information, and I've decided to only include name, email, location. But then right here again, notice that we're getting the status code back, we're getting headers back, we're getting a body back. And then what I did is I added this results. So this is the list that I want to pass, not the entire body, but just the results. And I'm passing it to a for each, and then I'm calling a helper flow. And I've decided to pass the entire object. So let's see how this works. Let me turn on. Oh, it's actually, I think it's on. So let me just show you how this looks. This is the result. So you can see this is the sort of the raw data, but I've got this is user one. It has a name, location, and then email, and then same thing for user two. Again, these are randomly. This is randomly generated data. So name. All right, and now I'm passing it to a helper flow, which is right here, and I'm retrieving the email, and notice that this it's a kind of sort of a nested object here, right? So location.street.name, right? In the previous examples, it was just one name, but actually being passed a whole object, so you can do this and retrieve that property there. So let's see how this looks. Again, looking at the input, we can see the name, and then see location, street, and then name. And then we can see that this is the email, and this is the street name of that user. All right. If you want to learn more about using get multiple, there's also a sort of a more basic version of this. It's called get. And then there's also get multiple. So get multiple allows you to retrieve multiple path values. Get will just retrieve one. So I have a blog post that I published some time ago that I'm going to include in the message that I send if you want to learn how to use the get or discard get multiple. So yeah, this is just an example, again, using getting data from a third-party API, and then also processing the list that you received using for each card in this example. But that's all I wanted to show you, and I know we just maybe have a few minutes left. If I put the link in the chat, but as this page has all the resources that you would need sort of for Okta workflows. If you have any questions, also please don't hesitate to email me directly, or Twitter, or LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find. It's just my Max Katz on Twitter and LinkedIn. I think that's all I wanted to show you. And again, this will be available right after we end the session and also on YouTube. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions, or again, you can always email me as well. All right. Well, I don't see any questions. So I'll end the session. But before I do that, thank you so much for joining today. I hope this was helpful. We'll have another one, I think, in December. If you have any suggestions, I know I always ask that. Please let me know what you would like to see. But again, thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.